Hello, good evening. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. The time is 5:40 p.m., and I am in Miami, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is super stalkers. You all remember that TV show Superman? You had a mild-mannered reporter named Clark Kent who during the day he occupied a modest job at the Daily Bugle newspaper. But when something went wrong, he'd go into a telephone booth, snatch off that work suit, and he had a pair of tights on underneath, a pair of shiny red boots, some spandex, and a shiny red cape. What did mild-mannered Clark Kent become when he came out of that suit? When it was time to fight crime, when it was time to get in the mix, when it was time to fulfill his calling as a crime fighter. What happened to him? His persona changed. His mentality changed. It didn't matter that the outfit he wore underneath that suit was peculiar. That was his crime fighting outfit. It worked for him. What else changed? His demeanor changed, and he displayed superhuman powers, like the ability to fly through the air, the ability to run faster than a speeding bullet, the ability to stop a freight train, with his bare hands. He had laser vision. He was nearly indestructible. He had lots of powers that he displayed when he came out of that work suit and put on his Superman costume. And if you look at the trajectory through the Superman television program or the Superman comic book strip, even the Superman video games, he is a very powerful superhero. And he's also a fan favorite too. I always thought Superman was one of the neater superheroes. He wasn't that complex. He wasn't that spellbinding. He didn't have these intricate, intertwisted plots in his life. He was a simple superhero with phenomenal powers, and I think that's part of his appeal. Now, what makes Superman super? Well, the word super in itself means beyond. So if he's Superman, that means he's beyond man. That means he's greater than the average man, or more capable than the average man. or more suitable to do extraordinary things than the average man. All of his superpowers are beyond what a normal man could do. The title of this lecture is Super Stalkers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's draw some parallels. But before I do, I'd like to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that these lectures are performed outside, and I may have to raise or project my voice from time to time in order to drown out the background noise, so adjust your volume accordingly. Furthermore, I'd like to issue a disclaimer. All of my work is my own. Every post, article, design, video, lecture, and every website built and created that hold the Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, EIS Media Group, Bible Discourses handle are original creations by myself. This is important because, as I explained in my weapons technology discourse on gang stalking, there is a system called Project Echelon in place in the gang stalking canon of, or rather the gang stalking repertoire, that enables stalkers to steal, rip off ideas from, copy, imitate, emulate, and act as imposters in the work, particularly the creative or intellectual property of targeted persons or businesses. I do no collaborations because I believe that this work that I do is better suited for the general public if it comes directly from the target himself. And that's not to say that I own the label target. Nobody wants to be a target, but for definitions purposes and for statistical purposes, I fit the targeted individual designation based on everything I've researched and experienced on this problem called gang stalking. What makes a stalker a super stalker? Well, it really isn't that much different than the example I gave about Superman. What made Superman super? His abilities to go outside of what normal people can do. His superpowers and abilities. What makes a super stalker super? The same. The ability to do what other people, regular people, average people, can't do. A lot of gang stalkers have what you might describe as normal jobs. You have stalkers that work in restaurants, you have stalkers that work in hotels, you have stalkers that work in sales or customer service. You got stalkers that work in the retail industry. You got stalkers that work in various public auxiliaries. You got stalkers that work in construction. You got stalkers that work in the mechanic industry. You got stalkers that work in general warehouses. You got stalkers that work in shopping malls. You got stalkers that work in casinos. You got stalkers that work in corporate America. I mean, you have stalkers working in high-ranking governmental positions. Okay? You have stalkers that work in a vast array of jobs and occupations. What makes a stalker a super stalker? Well, here's how a stalker becomes a super stalker. So anybody can stalk a person. If there's a person that you have a particular fascination with, whether the fascination is romantic or not, you can stalk that person if you know enough about them. And we've all seen movies or television programs or articles as to what a regular stalker is. What's a regular stalker? A regular stalker is someone who finds out where a person lives somehow. Maybe they look them up in the yellow pages or online. Maybe they drive past their house all the time to see what the person's up to. Maybe they dig through that person's trash can at night so they can see what that person eats or what their bank statements look like or what kind of stuff they throw away. You can find out where that person works and maybe follow them to see what route they take, or maybe you could go to the person's job and pose as a client or a customer to see what that person is up to. You can find hacking equipment and hack that person's cell phone or computer to find out what kind of websites they visit and what kind of calls they make and to who. You can find out who that person's relatives are. If you do enough digging and you can dig up that person's social security number, you can look at their credit report, see what kinds of revolving debt they have, see how good they are at paying that debt, have some semblance of that person's credit score, their credit worthiness, that type of thing. If you can find out this person's license plate number, you can run it in various capacities on different websites. It only takes about $20. You can run somebody's plate, get their driving history and how much their car cost, and you can pull the VIN number off of it to see if it's been in any accidents. You can take pictures of that person when they ain't looking, or if they're not suspecting it. Find out what kind of things they do on their days off. If that person has a significant other, maybe it's a wife or a husband, or maybe they have a girlfriend or boyfriend or someone that they're seeing, you can find out more about that person's character by who they date. You can find out the same information on a person's significant other that you can on that person that you're stalking. Then you become a double stalker. Now you're stalking somebody and their significant other. If the person you're stalking has children, you can stalk their children and find out what kind of parents the person you're stalking is. If that person has a pastime, maybe they work out, maybe they like to go to the movies, maybe they like to visit their local park, their local library. You can find out a lot about a person by their pastime and hobbies. If a person wants to, they can find out about a person's parents, their sisters, brothers, aunts, cousins, nieces, nephews, grandparents, to find out what kind of family they have. If you get real obsessed with them, you can try and intervene into their life at some point. As a matter of fact, there was a court case over in Michigan where there were two guys. One of them was Hispanic, one of them were black, and they stalked a wealthy couple for a period of time. And their goal, their mission, was to eventually intrude into these couples' homes and take their valuables. So they devised a scheme. They were going to pose as DTE workers, knock on their door late at night under the guise of having to perform some sort of electrical maintenance of some kind. And they were going to have uniforms on, fake uniforms. They were going to have a fake work order. And they were going to act as if they were employees of DTE. And when the couple, who up to that point had enjoyed 54 years of marriage, opened the door, these two fake DTE workers were going to intrude into their home, tie them up or otherwise subdue them, and rob them blind. So that's what they did. But in the fracas, those fake DTE workers killed the husband, robbed the place blind, and left the woman of the house a widow. Over the past 2 weeks or so, those two fake DTE workers were charged and convicted by a jury of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary and felony assault for their crimes. Both of these fake DTE workers were sentenced to life in prison, and rightfully so. That was a grisly, horrific, animal-like crime to commit against two unsuspecting people who have done nothing in their entire lives but contribute to society. And their wealth, which was a manifestation of their contributions to society and their hard work, was targeted by these two stalkers. We've also heard of various instances of celebrities being stalked, athletes being stalked, politicians being stalked by obsessed fans. Some people of note are stalked by people who absolutely hate them and wish to intrude into their lives. It's not enough for them just to stalk them, just to find out about them, but they want to intrude into their lives. They want to become a part of the person they're stalking, their life. Some want to intrude into their life to be a part of it. Some want to intrude to their lives as lovers or mistresses. Some want to intrude into their lives as deleterious third parties, like the DTE workers, and do these people some harm. But what makes a stalker a super stalker? Well, let's draw a line between what it means to be a gang stalker and what it means to be a regular stalker. When you're a regular stalker, you're acting on your own power. You're acting on your own interests. You're acting on your own fascination. You're acting on your own will. And you're using your own resources to stalk another person. Whether or not you have an intention of intervening into your subject's life in any way, good, bad, or ugly, you're acting on your own. A gang stalker is a super stalker in this respect. They're able to do things that a regular stalker may not be able to do. Just like Superman can do things that a regular person isn't able to do. A gang stalker is able to do more to terrorize a person because a gang stalker is not acting on their own resources. They're not using their own resources. They're using the resources and power of the state. So that gives them superpowers to pester people, to annoy people, to track people, to intervene into their lives, to harm them. Why? Because they have state resources helping them to do that. They don't have to time when a person leaves for work. They can get a signal from a liaison that'll tell them when their target leaves for work. That way, if they decide to bust into their house or steal something or vandalize the place, as I experienced in Dayton, Ohio, over a period of about a year, particularly from 2016 to 2017, my house was burglarized 10 times in 12 months. No doubt my stalkers were given signals by liaisons as to when I left, so that they could burglarize my home without me putting them down with my firearm that I keep in the living room. You see, a gang stalker, in this discourse we'll call them super stalkers, they have benefits that help them complete their mission of stalking that a regular stalker simply doesn't have. All right, there's a bus pulling up. No doubt there's a stalker walking up to disrupt. Yeah. This happens a lot. When I'm on my phone, a stalker will walk up and try to disrupt the lecture. They don't know why they're being asked to get off at this stop. They're just pointed to this stop and they get off and they descend upon me with annoyance, like this stalker here just did at this bus stop. Now, a gang stalker can do like what this stalker here just did. Okay, I got off at a obscure bus location off of the 107 bus route that's heading to Dolphin Mall. I got off at an obscure location so I could get through this lecture unpestered. But as so many other lectures go, and if you listen back to my past 3 to 5 lectures, they're disrupted by stalkers that happen to walk up or ride up on scooters like this one did. And a lot of times what happens is I'll be at a bus stop in an obscure location because, again, I want a nice quiet spot where I can finish the lecture. And some stalker that's on the bus gets a signal from a liaison or some useful idiot undercover operative to get off at the stop that I'm at, simply so they can get in my way while I'm talking, like this guy just did. And if I had been at the bus stop down the street, that's the stop he would have got off at. If I had gotten off at the bus at 2 bus stops down, 3 bus stops down, 5 bus stops down, that's the bus stop he would have gotten off at. It's not that that particular stalker just now at this moment needed to get off at this stop. He got off at the stop he was pointed to so that they could get in the way of my lecture. Because like I say, ladies and gentlemen, useful idiots that participate in gang stalking, they like attention. They like getting in the target's way. They like being seen by the target. Okay, that's what makes their lives meaningful. Being able to obstruct other people. Their lives have no meaning whatsoever or no joy if they cannot use state-sanctioned or other signaling mechanisms given to them by liaisons, undercover operatives, or other stalkers that are all plugged into the gang stalking campaign of the target to get in the target's way. So like I say, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't matter what bus stop I get off at. At some point during the lecture, one of these useful idiots is going to get pointed to my direction. He's going to get off at the exact stop that I'm at and try to get in my way for a few seconds or a few minutes. Now, when this person got off the bus, I called him out, and he heard me, and he stayed and listened for a few seconds before walking off, before riding off on his motorized scooter. And like I said, ladies and gentlemen, these stalkers, these liaisons, these undercover operatives, they want to be a part of my project. They want to be the stars of my project. So they keep interjecting themselves into my lectures by getting in my way as I'm talking. But I'm going to continue on in the interest of time and in the interest of the narrative of the lecture progressing. So, a super stalker doesn't have to use their own time, their own money, their own resources, their own strategy to find out about a person, to pester a person, or to intervene into that person's life. A gang stalker, a super stalker, can use the time, resources, and strategy of the community that they live in. Or they can use the time, resources, and strategy of a third party they've never met before. All they have to do is read the signals, ladies and gentlemen. Gang stalking is a signal-based operation. Stalkers communicate with signals so that they're not too obvious in what they do. Why? Because if they were obvious in what they did, and enough people started getting wise to what they were doing, they'd eventually start asking the federal establishment of this country questions that liaisons don't want to answer, undercover operatives don't want to answer, and gang stalkers don't want to answer. Why? Because they're gelatin, they're spineless, they're cowards. They like doing dirt in a covert manner. They like pestering people in a covert manner. They like giving each other the leg up in society in a covert manner. And their presence is not wanted. I don't want them around me. They're disgusting in my opinion. And we're not just talking about the ones here in South Florida. I sense very strongly there's an effort here in South Florida, particularly in the Kendall, Florida area, to paint my project as an attack on Cuban Americans. If that's what you think, I'm not really gonna bend over backwards trying to change your mind. You obviously don't listen to my lectures in depth, nor do you read my articles in depth. You just put 1 + 1 together. He's in South Florida. There's a lot of Cubans in South Florida. So if he's talking about gang stalking, he must be talking about Cubans. Nope. Gang stalking is regional in nature, and the ethnic or racial demographic of your gang stalkers is going to depend on one thing and one thing only, and that's what part of the country you lived in. I've experienced clandestine gang stalking in Ohio, Tennessee, and Florida, and I've seen this signaling mechanism, this pestering mechanism, this state-sanctioned intrusion that poses as national security protocol in all 3 states. So that ought to put that to rest, but for some reason, I don't think it will. However, super stalkers are able to use the power of the state to do their dirt. It's easier that way. You don't have to do any planning. You don't have to do any research. You don't have to do anything that resembles timing. If you want to pester a person that you know, or just somebody that someone else says you should pester because they have bad moral character or what have you, all you got to do is follow the signals that other people give you. That's all you got to do. The stalkers do all the work for you. And because it's a state-powered intrusion mechanism, it's a lot easier than doing it yourself. So if you're a stalker and you work at this place or that place and your life is uneventful, or maybe you're somebody that knew a person from 25 years ago and that person 25 years ago did or said something to you that upset you, and all these years later you learn about gang stalking and how you can be a gang stalker and how you can target or pester people using a state-sanctioned mechanism that's very effective, that's very well resourced, that's very well staffed, that's very prevalent in American society, and that's legal. You can find a way to get yourself plugged into a gang stalking campaign. All you got to do is tell enough people in your life how much another person harmed or hurt you and how much you want to get back at that person for something. If you say that to the right person, eventually they'll get you plugged into a gang stalking campaign against the person who you consider to be your enemy. Okay? The person that you're stalking doesn't have to be a targeted individual already. They can be a targeted individual already, and you can get plugged into the gang stalking campaign they're already experiencing. That's what's happened with me, for example. People I knew from 20 to 25 years ago, all right, people I knew 15 years ago, people I knew 10 years ago, who have an axe to grind or a bone to pick or some grudge. They found out that I was a targeted individual through my work online and said, hey, I want to join in on the fun. This guy ticked me off 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 25 years ago. I want to jump in on his gang stalking campaign and participate in the intrusion, in the disruption, in the attacks. I want to participate in that. How do I get plugged into his gang stalking campaign? Because that's the person who I don't like. That's the enemy I made all those years ago. How do I get involved in his gang stalking campaign? I don't want to pester any target. I want to pester that target. If you say it to the right person, then you're in there. I'm not sure if it's a pay-to-play system where if a person wants to take revenge on somebody who happens to be a target, you talk to the right people, you pay them a sum of money, they plug you into the gang stalking campaign, and you can conduct yourself like a useful idiot zoo animal and target or pester that person endlessly for a monthly fee. All you got to do is pay the liaisons, and they'll signal you to that person's location wherever he is. Or they could tell you how to signal other people to his location. You ain't got to go yourself. Stalkers don't have to go theirself. Undercover liaisons don't have to go theirself. Okay? They can signal other people to pester you. It would be like if I wanted to harm you or get you sick or do something like that, or maybe I wanted to cause a car accident with you as the victim. I don't have to smash into your car with mine. I can signal somebody else to drive into you. I can arrange for a car accident to happen. You see, that's the beauty of gang stalking. You don't have to get your own hands dirty. Okay? Maybe you paid a liaison, or you paid an undercover, or you paid a stalker for access to that enemy that you had, or that you still have. I believe me and my significant other have enemies that have used the gang stalking mechanism to get back at us, but how they got plugged in is a mystery. They obviously had to go through a liaison, because the liaisons are the ones that start the action. So those are federally enabled persons that are obviously enabled by the intelligence system here in the United States and the national security system here in the United States. And they start the action. If a targeted person looks like they're out of pocket, or if they look like they've committed some infraction against another person, or if they've committed some action that needs punishment or what have you, yeah, liaisons get the action started. They point the stalkers and the undercovers to your location so that they can wreak havoc to and around you. So if this is a pay-to-play system where a person can pay somebody to get involved in your gang stalking campaign, they would have had to have paid a liaison. And the liaison goes, sure, I'll plug you right in. This is what it's going to cost monthly for you to stay on. What would you like to see happen to this person? They're already in a gang stalking campaign. Now you can take the wheel of his gang stalking campaign and direct it however you want. What would you like to see happen to this person? This enemy you had from 10, 15, or 25 years ago, what would you like to see happen? We have a menu of things that we can cause to happen to this person. We got car accidents, we got hit and runs, we got physical violence, we can get him sick for you, okay? We can cause problems for him on the job, we can cause problems for him in his interpersonal relationships for you, we can damage his home or his property or his vehicle for you. We can scare him if you want. We can hire some thug to rob him. We can give you personal information. We can show you pictures of his emails and data and his Google Drive account and his personal messages on social media. We can spy on his loved ones for you. We can disrupt them for you if you want. You see, it's a state-sanctioned human atrocity, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine being able to pay somebody to cause a catastrophe in somebody else's life without the problems coming back to you or them. There's no trace of evidence that brings their cataclysm back to you. It's not like going to your local park or going to your local mall or going anywhere for that matter and finding somebody that looks a little rough around the edges and says, hey, how much could I pay you to harm somebody? Or hey, do you know somebody else that I could pay to harm a person? Well, by the time the harm is done, whether this is a beat down for hire or a murder for hire, by the time the harm is done, there's going to be traces of evidence that lead back to you and this other person. People who do murder for hires get caught in this country all the time. And they typically go down for first-degree murder, and they typically get life in prison without the possibility of parole. There is no clearer example of first-degree murder than a murder for hire. It is a pre-planned, preconceived murder of another person initiated by you and another person or multiple other people. Sometimes murder for hires or hits, as they call them, are planned by multiple people. I believe I had one recently that was thwarted, that was being planned by dozens and dozens of people across state lines. It got thwarted somehow. But just think of it. You could get plugged into a mechanism here in the United States, a state-sanctioned atrocity, state-sanctioned thuggery, state-sanctioned murder, state-sanctioned anything. Something that could be problematic for the target, something that could be problematic for the target's significant other. And you get to be a part of that. You get to steer the wheel of the machine called gangstalking. Just pay the liaison, and he'll tell you what to do. Because liaisons and undercover operatives and stalkers, they don't like it when their hands get dirty. When their hands get dirty, they like to help other people get their hands dirty as well, so that they look less bad if the whole thing blows up in their stinking faces. Imagine being able to do that. Your worst enemy, maybe that person you knew 25, 30 years ago, that you always wanted to get back at for something. Well, now here's your chance, and nothing will ever get back to you. First, we'll see if they're already a targeted individual, and then that'll make it really easy because we have extra resources to pester, harass, harm, or attack that person with. And you'll get to see the result of the attack. We'll use pictures, we'll use audio, we'll use video. We might even let you hop in your car and you can follow us to wherever he is right now so you can see the result of your attack and feel satisfied in the service that you participated in. Imagine being able to be plugged into a mechanism that allows you to become a super stalker. You don't have to use your own resources. You don't have to use your own planning. You don't even have to be creative about it. Because someone's already done that for you. Why? Because this person is already a targeted individual. All we got to do is plug you in, keep an open line of communication open, and you and I can wreak havoc in this person's life and in the life of their significant other for a nominal fee. You pay me $1,000, I'll give you the resources to pester this person for an entire week. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the difference between a stalker and a super stalker? A super stalker can do things that a regular stalker can't do. A super stalker has access to government resources. A super stalker has access to untold numbers of ready-made stalkers who are already plugged into this thing, who already know signals, and who already know how to make a clean getaway if they have to commit some thuggish crime against a person. Who gets put in such a mechanism? There's a list of reasons that a person becomes a targeted individual. The official list, however, has never been released to the public. So these lists that you see going around online as to how and why a person becomes a target, they're speculative, but I find them to be reliable. Gang stalking is extrajudicial in nature, and there are no official summons to the target as to when they're going to be put in this thing, why they're going to be put in this thing, and how long they're going to be put in this thing. They just thrust you in. And it appears to me that the very national security mechanism in this country that oversees gang stalking campaigns is also in control of what the news media can and can't talk about. They also tell churches and pastors what they can and can't talk about. They tell college professors, well, particularly college deans, who oversee the curriculum that college professors use, what they can and can't talk about in college classrooms. This same national security mechanism has influenced a protocol in the psychiatric community that immediately labels people who come forward about this as psychotic or schizophrenic. The truth has been muzzled here in this state-sanctioned murder, state-sanctioned robbery, state-sanctioned thuggery mechanism. Well, the American people aren't complaining, so why should we listen? Us congressional representatives, we answer to the National Security Administration. We answer to the Departments of Defense and Justice. If they don't want us to talk about this in the interest of national security, we're not going to talk about it. Well, the national news media here, we're advised by the Department of Defense what we can and can't talk about in the interest of national security. So if they say we can't talk about clandestine gang stalking, we're going to have to leave it to this Smith feller. Well, this college or university, that college or university, our deans are also directed by the Departments of Defense and Justice as to what we can use in our college curriculums. If they say we can't teach nothing about gang stalking in our colleges, we're not going to teach nothing about gang stalking in our colleges because they think it's a breach of national security to talk about gang stalking. The pastor of this church, the pastor of that church, the bishop of this parish, or the priest of that parish, okay, the cardinals of these parishes and so forth, we can't talk about it. We're advised by the Departments of Defense and Justice as to what we can talk about in our parishes and our masses because, you know, I mean, we don't want to put this country at risk, so we're not going to talk about gang stalking because we're told we can't. We're going to leave it to this Emmanuel person. This newspaper, that newspaper, sorry, we can't talk about it either. The Department of Defense and Justice have told us not to touch on that one. Sorry, E.I. Smith, you're on your own on that one. That's fine. I will gladly be the President of the United States, the editor-in-chief of every newspaper in the country, the chief executive officer of every cable news program in the country, the top executive of every local news paper in the country, the pastor of every church in the country, and the director of operations of every college or university in the country right here on my own program. Because you know what, ladies and gentlemen? I have exercised all of those offices every day for 10 years. Through my exposure of gang stalking, I am single-handedly doing on my Gang Stalking in Action program and lecture series what all of the above named cannot do, will not do. I am doing it. And I do it gladly. Because the truth is a beautiful thing, especially when it's put out there. If you don't know the truth, it can't set you free. If you don't know the truth, it can't liberate you. If you don't know the truth, you can't benefit from the truth. If there's a clandestine mobbing operation that is signal-based and state-sanctioned in this country, whether it gives people the leg up over their competitors in the workplace or whether it's used to terrorize people, it does not make for a civil society. It does not make for a good society. It does not make for a humane society. Now, we don't live in a private society. We live in a public society. The actions of government and governmental staffers is public information and should be made public. I've never been a fan of top secret stuff because you never know what's in those files. Gang stalking is obviously top secret. There's billions, if not trillions of dollars invested in this thing since 2003. And you have a mechanism, a state-sanctioned mechanism, where U.S. citizens are being used as weapons against other U.S. citizens. That is not right. I am working to get this thing exposed and repealed, ladies and gentlemen, for my sake, for the sake of my loved ones, for the sake of my progeny, for the sake of anyone who loves truth and justice, for the sake of anyone who loves freedom and liberty. This government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. Gang stalking infringes on that. Our government is supposed to be one that observes inalienable rights. Gang stalking infringes upon that. Our government is supposed to be one that respects no taxation without representation. Gang stalking infringes upon that. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen.